Hello, everyone. My name is McKenzie Kane with the National Sports Media Association, joined by the 2024 Montana Sportscaster of the Year, Herm Elenbaas. Mr. Elenbaas, thank you for speaking with me today.
Well, this is great. I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, do you mind just starting off with a brief introduction and sharing what you're currently doing in the world of sports broadcast?
Well, it's been a long journey, a fun journey, and it's been great. I started out covering some girls basketball back in 1987. My daughter got into volleyball as a varsity player in high school, and we went through all the club procedures and all that stuff. So I really got a good handle on, volleyball terminology and how the game is played. And of course, I grew up. I'm 6'8", so I grew up as a basketball player and did all the gym rat stuff. So I knew that sport. And then I was lucky enough to have a former Montana winner work with me for a long time. I got to sit by him and get the system for what we're doing. Right now, I'm owning a Christian radio station here in Billings, Montana. It's a 93.3 FM. It has a 100,000 watt signal. So we cover most of south central Montana and northern Wyoming. Through the years, we've built up a pretty good relationship with the local high schools. So we cover high school, not all the games, but we're able to pick and choose a little bit. But for example, in the past season, personally, I did about 45 games during the basketball season, including state tournament opportunities. And it's just been a great ride. It's just a passion of mine, and I look forward to doing it more in the future.
And how long have you been doing this job for?
Well, I've been on the job here in Billings since 1982. When I came out here from Kalamazoo, Michigan, and started managing this radio station. I bought the station back in 1994, so I got to be my own boss as I was developing our sports coverage here on the station.
Well, this is actually your first time receiving this award. So can you just share what this accomplishment means to you and being selected by other sportscaster in the area?
Well, I guess the cool thing is, the people that I get to put my name next to. I've been a fan and a student of all the people that I watch on TV. I try to pick up good habits, and I've just been amazed by them. And now to be mentioned in the same sentence with people like the winners this year and so on. It's just enormously fun, and I'm very thankful.
Well, you mentioned you grew up in sports and your daughters grew up in sports. Can you just walk me through that moment when you realized this was the field you wanted to get into and how your career has progressed since then?
Well, it's interesting because I started out at Brown Institute, like a lot of radio people did. That's in Minneapolis, and it was a pretty well-known trade school for radio back then. And they actually offered a sportscasting class, but I didn't take it. But I did go to some of the Twins games, and I got to sit along with them. So it more about it kind of developed organically. I had a fella come to work for me that was a former winner back in the early 80s, and he came to me with a suggestion of putting a girls. We had a pretty hot local team at the time, and he had a deep sports background, and he wanted to talk me into covering those games. And as a Christian station, you don't always put Christian radio in connection with sports, but I had that sports background, so that made it a wide open subject for me, and it kind of grew from there.
Well, what does a typical week look like for you in terms of setting up the broadcast and then just preparing for the games?
Well, right now I'm in my off season, so a typical week doesn't include all that. But in the course of a normal season, uh, it starts late August and it goes through about the second week of March. We start looking at the high school schedules in late August. Of course, that's football and volleyball. We compare that to which school is playing what game, and we kind of mesh them all together and turn it into a schedule. Then we go out and present it to advertisers, which hasn't been a problem because we have a pretty good reputation for doing what we're doing, and we have great local advertising support. So at that point, we get into our season, and then it's kind of a blur, and then it kind of builds up to tournament time, playoff time, and that's when it really gets interesting because it's win or go home kind of situations, and that's always a lot of fun for an announcer who has a passion for this because everybody's hanging on every word in a lot of these tight games. And then the basketball season starts right after that. We've been an early proponent of girls events. They never had to tell us to do girls games because I had daughters, and plus, sport is sport to me. So we've always been a strong proponent of almost equal girls coverage with boys coverage, and that's been a very rewarding thing.
I'm curious, do you notice any difference in the way you approach broadcasting for men's versus women's games or boys versus girls games?
Absolutely not. I've heard some other announcers that it's kind of a must-have to do kind of thing, and I'm not trying to be critical because everybody has their own shtick. But for me, it's never been this is better than this. Some games are obviously more exciting than others. You can't take away from a boring game versus an exciting game. But I've always felt that it's my job as an announcer to make all games interesting. Even if there's a dog game or a bad game going on, I'm going to find something good to say about that game. Obviously, the score is going to even things out, but my personal approach has been to be an encouraging kind of sportscaster. I'm not going to pick apart at this level in small market sportscasting. That's got to be the best way to do it.
Well, as someone who has been in radio and in this whole industry for north of 40 years, it sounds like, how have you seen it change since the early 80s?
Well, there's obviously the rule changes. I think kind of sad to say, but media has really exploded around sports in my time, and there's so many ways to get a sporting event. You can, for example, I work with the NFHS network, and I let them use my audio, which is a national internet video kind of thing. But before that, people relied on radio a little more, and then I've always noticed, crowds at games and, is it moms and dads or, what kind of games draw the hugest crowds? Some schools obviously have a better following than others. But it's as time has gone on, I think we've gone to fewer people being regular every game attenders, and a lot of that has to do with how much media is available. But I always thought that as a sportscaster, you have offering something unique. It's your vision, your personality tied into what's going on with the game, and trying to keep people posted on the important things like stats and score. But every person who's doing what I'm doing has a unique personality, and if they can work that into the game call, you're that much more interesting to the people listening.
Well, in a field that's primarily audio centered like radio, I'm curious, how do you value those skills of being a strong writer or being just a good storyteller, both verbally and written?
I could go by, the feedback I've gotten through the years, and it's been positive, and I have a little bit of a sense of humor, so I try to work that into the game, and I'm not sure I'm answering your question just right, but something as simple as volleyball celebrations after a point. I'm always talking about expressions and happiness, after a point, because these events, tied into an individual whose name I'm calling, turning into a game point or something, are really huge to a listener. And you almost feel, your listeners hanging on every word you're saying. And in fact, I've often thought about when you're doing a game in a big crowd, and they're all watching the same thing you are, that you're almost like a symphony conductor because you're directing things, and then the big play happens, you're announcing it, and then the crowd roars. It just feels like a crescendo that you're directing there. It's kind of a weird little thing that I've felt through the years, but it makes it a lot of fun. But I probably left your question there. Did I answer your question?
No, that was great.
Okay.
I love the analogy. I love the
Yeah.
visualization.
Well, it is. It's like if you see it, you say it, bam, there's the crowd just enormously endorsing what you just called.
Well, throughout your career, were there any stories or piece of reporting broadcasts that just had a significant impact on you or were particularly memorable?
tons of them. Covering 3 high schools, and I've also done like national volleyball for the Frontier Conference here, at the national level and stuff. And there's just so many stories. But one of my favorites, I actually have a couple I could share with you, is I worked as a sports team with one of the former winners, as I mentioned, and we'd always go to the state tournament and do the play-by-play and color guide thing. And we went with great expectations to Butte one time, and our team got blown out in 2 games. So we were on the way home, thinking we just missed the Saturday thing and all the fun that a season builds up to. And it turned into a great opportunity because I had been watching a team from Millstone, Montana, because we had some friends that lived there. That's a town of about maybe 50 or 60 in farm country, ranch country in Montana. And I had gotten to know them a little bit and had gone to a couple of divisional games, and they had some superstars on that team. Well, when we got home, because we had just been denied the opportunity to call our usual team, we found out they were playing in the state championship right in town in Billings. So I called Rocky, my buddy, and said, hey, you want to put this together and put this on the air? They had no radio coverage. And so they had a state tournament game that him and I kind of put together in one morning, and we asked all the permissions. We got a few sponsors from, their family people and stuff, and decided to put their state championship game on the air. Well, this is a high school of 20 people. I mean, that's the total high school population. They went up against a team from Gardner, Montana, which, had, I think, a big city guy that had transferred there and he had made an impact on the team. Great people as well, but they faced off in a classic battle in Metra. Probably the whole community of Millstone was there, and we were on the spot to call that, and Millstone went to overtime and won their first state championship. And it was just one of the coolest things I've ever been part of. And Rocky, who does a local sports show, still plays highlights from that tape or from that game. And another thing was, it's nice to see, teams that rise from performance that was not good for a long time and take it to the top. And I had that just a couple of years ago. My own daughter went to Skyview High. She played basketball there, but in her time, they struggled to win 1 or 2 games a year. And that was a pattern. They haven't been to the state championship in Billings since 2001, or state championship as a high school, as a girls team since 2001. And I'm talking about 2021 here, I think, just after the pandemic. And they had a great nucleus of players. They had an inspirational coach. The year before, they had finished 3rd. Well, let me correct that. They had earned their first trip to the state tournament a year before with the same nucleus. And when they got to the tournament, they lost the first game. And then we all know what happened the second night when the pandemic shut everything down. Now, they were not going to win that year, but the next year they came back, and in their hometown here in Billings, Montana, they got to play in front of a huge blue-clad crowd, which was their colors at the school. And I got to be the announcer for the play-by-play. And that had to be one of the most satisfying and happy experiences for me.
Well, I think you just touched on it.
And they won. They won. So, and we walked over to the corner of how celebrations are after big wins. But here's a cavernous place. They walked over into the corner, and I kind of trailed over there after the call. And the whole school, everybody who is related to Skyview High was back there jumping up and down with the coach, and he was just as goofy as the rest of them, and everybody was crying. In fact, they were starting to cry before the end of the game. They were playing against a team that had a 6'7" girl on the team, which you think would dominate. But they had just put together a team. They had an inspirational coach, and they made it happen that year. And I got to be the voice on it. That was one of my highlights of my career.
Well, I mean, you just touched on it a little bit with that story. I think oftentimes the majority of attention goes toward professional sports and college sports, but can you tell me what is special and unique about calling high school?
Well, it's just the people, the relationships. When I won this award, for example, back whenever I was told by Dave Gorin about winning the award, and they did the little notice, that I was able to copy and put on my Facebook page. I showed it to the athletic director at the game I was doing, which happened to be like the same night or something like that. And I said, "Here, look at this. Isn't this cool?" And little to my knowledge, I'm doing a game that was pretty exciting. And I have your headset on, so that kind of that covers all the noise in the building. But the PA announcer there gave me this huge shout out to this huge crowd, and they celebrated and clapped, and I never knew it. I knew it when I walked out of the gym with the people that were at the game, and I had more people than usual coming up and thanking me and congratulating me. And the funny thing is I I never heard a word of it, but that was just really cool, and that's kind of what high school is. I have been totally satisfied to do high school. I've done a lot of college as well. College volleyball is one of my favorite sports, but high school is right up there with it. It's the people, it's the players that probably aren't going to go any farther. A lot of them, they'll play in small colleges, and few of them make it to the big colleges. But just the people and the response this year, for example, I had a young lady of a 3-18 team. They made it to divisionals. I guess everybody makes it to divisionals, and in the last game that she played, I'd called her games, volleyball and basketball, throughout her career. It just broke my heart because we've talked a couple of times, but it's nothing like we're exchanging texts or anything. But she made it a point to come out of her knot of happy people to walk across the gym and come over and thank me. And you don't see that all the time with players. You get to know the players pretty well, but that was just an example of high school. They recognize that what I've done as far as encouraging them and kind of making them famous, all over the world, of the people listening on the internet and so on. She actually made a point to walk across the gym, and as I was packing up, came over and thanked me, and we chatted about what she was doing next. And that's happened multiple times, but this is the most recent, and it just really sticks with me as an example of high school sport.
Beautiful. Now, I just before I let you go, do you have any advice for aspiring sports broadcasters and reporters like myself on where to start and how to stand out?
Well, just follow your passion, let your own personality be part of it. Just a really silly thing, but don't forget to say the score when you're doing a game. I've heard so many announcers that they do a great play and they never mention the score. Yeah. In fact, I had one, and that's a real simple tip, but I remember hearing a quote when I was very young from Red Grange or something, and he said he had an egg timer in the broadcast booth with him, and he would turn it over and he'd make sure he mentioned the score every 3 minutes of a game, and that's what kind of reminded him. And I'm not sure if he did that his whole career, but I remember Vin Scully telling that story. I got a chance to meet Vin Scully at some kind of NAB conference or something, and he mentioned that, no, that wasn't me, it was Red Grange. But it's just such a simple thing. But follow your passion, get to know the sport. I don't know all the sports, and I'm not trying to do those sports, but get to know the people, be friendly. You don't have to be someone who's criticizing the refs and all that stuff. And that's something I've been known for. I've never really gotten on refs, or, I'll find ways to say interesting call or something like that. But, get to know the people and just enjoy what you're doing. And it's not really good hours. My wife will tell you that I was gone a lot of times, and she started to come with me to games. But get to know the people, get to know the coaches, be a part of the team that's on the floor, and keep your ears open. And if you're doing something wrong, or if you're mispronouncing a name, correct it. Do it with a smile. I don't know. That I could go on and on, but those are some of the keys, and they're not very scientific, but they're real practical.
I know it sometimes those fundamentals are exactly what you need to hear.
Yep. Yep.
Mr. Elenbaas, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to sit down with me. Congratulations again on the accomplishment.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate you giving me a call on this.